My wife said she was too busy for our son's birthday. She didn't expect the guest I invited, and the surprise guest exposed secrets she never imagined. When my son turned 8, he was buzzing with excitement. He'd been counting down the days for weeks, sketching out invitations with crayons, and talking nonstop about balloons, cake, and games. For him, this birthday was the biggest deal of the year. For me, it was about giving him a day he'd never forget. But for my wife, it was apparently just another Saturday. When I reminded her about the party, she sighed, said she was too busy with work stuff, and brushed me off. I wanted to believe she'd still show up, even late. After all, how could a mother skip her own child's birthday? The morning of the party, I decorated the living room with streamers and hung a giant "Happy Birthday" banner across the wall. My son's smile made it worth every minute. His friends from school began to arrive, parents dropping them off with wrapped gifts and cheerful wishes. Laughter filled the house, but there was still one empty chair at the table. Every time the doorbell rang, my son's eyes lit up, expecting it to be her. And every time, disappointment crept in when it wasn't. I felt my stomach twist. I couldn't let him feel forgotten on his special day. That's when I made a decision that would change the mood entirely. Instead of waiting around for my wife, I had invited someone else, someone she would never expect to walk through that door. And the moment they arrived, the entire room froze. The door swung open, and there stood my mother-in-law, my wife's own mother, whom she hadn't spoken to in nearly 2 years. The tension between them had been building for ages. My wife always said her mother was too controlling, while her mom claimed my wife had grown selfish and cold. But for my son, Grandma was pure joy. The moment he saw her, he ran straight into her arms, grinning ear to ear. She brought a giant wrapped box almost as big as him, and he squealed when she set it down. The kids swarmed around, curious about what was inside. I glanced at her with a quiet smile. "Thank you for coming," I said. She patted my arm and whispered, "For my grandson, I'd never miss this." There was no bitterness in her voice, just love. The party came alive again. Music, games, and laughter filled the air. My son was glowing with happiness, darting between his friends and proudly showing off his new gift. For a moment, it felt perfect. But deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time before my wife realized who was here. And when she did, the celebration would turn into something else entirely. Halfway through the party, my phone buzzed. It was my wife. "I'll try to swing by later, but don't count on me. Busy." That single line made my blood boil. She didn't even ask how the party was going, or if her son was happy. I put my phone down and went back to the living room. My mother-in-law was kneeling by the kids, helping them pin a paper tail on a cardboard donkey. She was laughing, clapping, completely present. The kind of warmth my son deserved from his own mother. At one point, my son turned to me and said, "Daddy, this is the best birthday ever." He didn't mention his mom. Didn't even ask for her. That stung more than I expected. As the kids gathered for cake, we lit the candles and everyone sang. I filmed the moment, but my son didn't look at the empty chair where his mother should have been. He looked at his grandma, grinning wide, as she leaned in to help him blow out the flames. It was beautiful and painful, because I knew sooner or later my wife would find out that the very person she'd cut out of her life had just stolen the spot she abandoned. An hour later, just as the kids were breaking open the piñata, the front door opened again. My wife finally walked in. She wasn't carrying a gift bag or even balloons, just her laptop tucked under her arm and that distracted look on her face. At first, no one noticed. The kids were too busy scrambling for candy. But then her eyes landed on the couch, where her mother sat watching with a proud smile. My wife froze mid-step, color draining from her face. "Mom," she muttered, as if she'd seen a ghost. The room went quiet for a moment, only the sound of children laughing in the background. Her mother stood up slowly. "Yes, I wasn't going to let my grandson spend his birthday without me." Her tone wasn't harsh, just firm, steady, full of meaning. My wife glanced around the room. Parents, kids, family, friends, everyone was watching. She forced a smile, but I could see the storm building behind her eyes. "Can we talk? Outside." Now she hissed at me. I knew this was coming, but what she didn't know was that I had been waiting for this confrontation all day. We stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind us. Inside, the muffled sound of kids cheering over candy contrasted sharply with the heavy silence between us. "What the hell is she doing here?" my wife snapped, her voice low but trembling. "You know I don't want her around." I crossed my arms. "She's here because you weren't. He deserves someone who actually shows up for him. And today, that wasn't you." Her jaw clenched. "I told you I had work. You think dragging my mother into this circus makes it better?" I let out a bitter laugh. "Better?" He's smiling, laughing, actually happy. "All thanks to her. You didn't even bring him a gift." For a moment, she didn't answer. Her eyes darted toward the window, where she could see her son hugging his grandma, showing her a fistful of candy like it was treasure. Something in her expression cracked, just slightly. "You went behind my back," she whispered. But this time her anger sounded weaker, almost drowned out by something else, guilt. I looked at her steadily. "No. You walked away. Someone had to step in." And for the first time in a long while, she had no quick reply. When we walked back inside, the party had moved on to gift opening. My son was tearing through wrapping paper with that unstoppable excitement only kids can have. Every time he revealed a toy or book, the room erupted in claps and cheers. My wife hovered near the doorway, stiff and uneasy. She didn't sit, didn't join, just stood there like a guest who didn't belong. My son barely even looked her way. His eyes were on his grandma, who sat cross-legged on the rug, laughing along with him. Then he reached the biggest box, the one she had brought. He ripped the paper and pulled out a shiny red bicycle, complete with a bow on the handlebars. The kids gasped, and my son's face lit up like fireworks. "Thank you, Grandma," he shouted, running to hug her. He didn't even glance at his mother. That hug seemed to last forever, his little arms locked around her neck, while she held him as if she'd never let go. I caught my wife's face in that moment, the tight smile, the way her eyes darted down, then quickly away. It wasn't anger this time. It was something raw, something that looked an awful lot like regret. But the moment couldn't be undone. Her absence had already spoken louder than any words could. After the gifts, the kids ran outside to try the new bike. My mother-in-law walked with them, steadying the handlebars as my son climbed on. He wobbled at first, then took off across the driveway, his laughter echoing down the street. Parents clapped, kids cheered, and I snapped pictures on my phone. My wife stayed behind, arms crossed, watching from a porch. She looked small, almost out of place, as if the celebration had moved on without her. When her mother returned, cheeks flushed from running alongside the bike, she passed me a knowing look. "He's happy," she said softly. Then, lowering her voice, added, "He deserves more of this. Consistency. Love that doesn't make excuses." My wife heard it. I could tell by the way her shoulders stiffened. She didn't respond, just turned away, as if the words had stung too deep. I stayed quiet too. I didn't need to defend myself, not when the proof was right there, a child who had already chosen where his joy came from that day. And as the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the yard, I realized this birthday wasn't just for my son. It was a turning point for all of us. When the party wound down, and parents began picking up their kids, the house finally grew quieter. My son sat at the table, still clutching a piece of cake, his cheeks pink from running around. My mother-in-law kissed his forehead before gathering her things. "Call me anytime, sweetheart," she told him. "Grandma will always be here." He hugged her again, tighter this time, and whispered, "Best birthday ever." My wife stood by the doorway, silent. She didn't argue, didn't roll her eyes, didn't make a scene. She just let her mother leave with dignity. When the door shut, the silence between us thickened. Later that night, after my son fell asleep surrounded by his new toys, I found her sitting on the edge of the bed, laptop closed beside her. She looked up at me, her eyes tired. "I didn't think it mattered," she said quietly. "I thought one birthday wouldn't make a difference." I leaned against the doorframe. "It's not just one birthday. It's about showing up. And today you didn't." For once, she didn't fight back. She just nodded slightly, as if the truth finally settled in. But the damage was already done, not just between her and her son, but between the two of us. The next morning, my son rushed to the kitchen, already asking if he could ride his new bike again. His excitement was pure, unstoppable. He didn't mention his mom once. He only asked if Grandma might come visit soon. My wife stood by the counter, holding her coffee like it was the only thing keeping her steady. She flinched at his words, but forced a smile. "We'll see," she murmured. He didn't notice the heaviness in her voice. Kids rarely do. When he ran outside, I turned to her. "Do you understand now?" I asked. She didn't look at me, just stared into her cup. "I missed it," she whispered. "I missed everything." There was no anger in her tone, no excuses this time. Just a hollow kind of realization. I almost pitied her, almost. But pity doesn't rebuild broken trust. Because the truth was simple. She hadn't just missed a birthday. She'd missed a chance to be present, to matter in the moments that shape a child's memories. And someone else had stepped into that space without hesitation. Weeks later, my son still talked about that birthday. Not about the cake or the games or even a pile of presents, but about Grandma teaching him to ride his bike. That single memory outshone everything else. My wife tried, in her own way, to make up for it. She came home earlier a few nights, asked about school, even offered to take him to the park. But the spark in his eyes wasn't the same. He had learned a quiet lesson. Love isn't about promises, it's about showing up. One evening, as I tucked him in, he whispered, "Daddy, do you think Mom will come to my next birthday?" The innocence in his voice cut deeper than any argument we'd ever had. I smiled softly, brushing his hair back. "We'll make sure your day is special no matter what." It wasn't the answer he wanted, but was the only one I could give. Down the hall, I saw my wife standing in the doorway, frozen, tears brimming, but unshed. She had heard him. Maybe that was what she needed, not my words, but his. And in that moment, I knew one thing for certain. Some mistakes can't be undone, only remembered.